Well, I'm always about the American Sign Language. So if you had me before, you'll probably see some of the same stuff again. But this is kind of like accumulation of all my linguistics classes, research for the past, I don't know, 5 classes maybe? I don't know. Because I always chose sign language as my topic whenever I could. But anyways, about me, if you may not know, but I was actually born deaf. So it wasn't until I was 2 years old that I got a hearing aid, and I was able to perceive sound for the first time. Luckily, however, luckily my parents immediately taught me sign language as my first language. And then from that, it kind of jump-started me into learning spoken language, English. So I can always say like, oh, English is not my first language. Sign language is my first language. So it's like, kind of funny. But yeah, so that's why I chose this topic, because my personal history. I'm deaf. Sign language is my first language. Okay, so I just want to talk about the background of sign language here. Some background. Who uses sign language? Well, obviously, it's deaf and hard of hearing people. But many people have this misconception that sign language is just a language. It does not have any of the cultures that other languages may have, because it's not tied down to a country. It's tied down to the hearing loss of a person. Yeah, that's what I just said. So I want to talk about the culture that surrounds sign language. So sign language has the culture of the capital D, deaf. Now, if you've taken my class before, you know what I mean by capital D, deaf. But in this culture, whether you use the capital D or the lowercase d when you write, actually there is a difference in the meaning. So when they use the capital D, it refers to people who fully accept who they are as somebody who has hearing loss. So they still see themselves as 100% a person. And they will always try to seek out the uppercase deaf community, so people like them. And they will only try to communicate in sign language. Like, even if they could hear, they still only want to talk in sign language. So if they want to talk to normal people, they'll actually hire an interpreter just to talk for them, even if they can't speak. Now, the lowercase deaf people refers to people who are considered hearing people who lost some of their hearing. And this definition is from the uppercase deaf community. So it's they kind of like look down on the lowercase d people. And they say this because these people want to be part of mainstream societies. They still go to mainstream schools. They get like hearing aids. They try to talk. They don't really learn sign language. I kind of consider myself a lowercase d deaf person, but only because like I don't sign that much. That's the only thing. And moving on to oralism. Now, oralism is what happened to other languages such as Hawaii, other indigenous languages like Okinawan, the Native Americans. So deaf culture and sign language was actually banned from being taught in the Western world of deaf and hard of hearing school education. And they were forced to try to only use oral language, to only use the spoken language. Thus the name oralism. The oralism, oral is like mouth, you know. So how this happened was in 1880, there was something called the Congress of Milan. And basically, it's a gathering of deaf educators noticed the lowercase d. So these are people who were still wanted to be part of mainstream. So at the end of the conference, they announced like, oh, deafness is abolished. And so they made it so there was no sign language being taught in schools, and by extension, there wasn't any development in deaf culture. And this lasted for almost a century until it was finally overturned. The deaf community called this time period the Deaf Holocaust. And of course, they faced some criticism comparing it to the Holocaust because people weren't actually killed. But the response was like, the Jewish Holocaust was bodies was destroyed, but they said like this one was, it destroyed their minds because they were trying to teach deaf and hard of hearing people how to talk when they couldn't even perceive sound. So the damage done. So I found this study in 1974 by Oxford University, but led by Ruben Conrad, who was a professor at the time. And he's found that the English literacy level of deaf school leavers, this was during the deafness was abolished period. He found that deaf students often left schools because they couldn't keep up, they couldn't learn. So they left schools, and what they found was their literacy level was of an 8-year-old. They could barely understand newspaper headlines. This was like high school and middle schoolers leaving schools. And their spoken speech, which was what Oilers was trying to promote, was understood by no one except for their teachers and direct family. And deaf people, we naturally have high ability of lip reading, just because of how sign language works. So we have naturally high level lip reading, but these people at this time period, the lip reading was no better than a normal hearing person. And Oilism today in the modern world, the deaf community, the uppercase deaf community views Oilism in hearing aids, such as what I have here on my head right here. This kind, they would, if they see me, they'll be like, oh, he suffered from Oilism, even though I don't think that way, but they think, oh, his parents forced him to get that. But I was actually old enough to know what getting this meant. I was like 7 years old, 8 years old. So at that time, I was like, oh yeah, I want this thing. I want to hear more. So, Oilism, people who wanted to promote Oilism use hearing aids to bring the partially deaf into mainstream schools. And some of them came back to the deaf community after they didn't work out, and the deaf community called it finding their way back home. But others with more hearing, like me, continue to try to be integrated into mainstream society. So I feel like I'm pretty successful being integrated in mainstream society. So I don't really try not to be associated. It's just like, just naturally I just don't be associated because I'm in mainstream. But the deaf community sees it as like, they don't want to be part of us because they're shameful of being deaf, which was from the Oilism movement. Okay, so that was the history behind deaf culture and sign language, but let's talk about the actual structure of sign language. And you guys all know what phonology means, yeah? Phonology is the sound of a language. But what's interesting is sign language does not have sound, but it still has phonology. So when I took phonology class, this was my big topic, and I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool because normally people wouldn't associate phonology with sign language. So the phonology of sign language does not use sound, but it uses the space around you and your hand movements and hand shape. Certain space location will have a meaning. For example, signs around the head will have meaning related to the brain. For example, thinking, dreaming, and learning. So all these signs have about the brain, and they all occur around the forehead area. So there's no consonant and vowels, but more like hand shapes. So this is the ABC of sign language. So lots of signs use these hand shapes. So the first part of phonology of sign language is hand configuration, which is the hand shape, which is basically what I showed back here. This is our hand shapes. So in this example I gave, I have 3 signs: candy, apple, and jealous. So you notice that all these signs have kind of the similar hand shapes. And this is how we would linguistically describe the differences, be like index out, hand compact, or index out, or not compact. So it's like straight out, index out, and compact. Or no index, but pinky. So like candy, apple, and jealous. So it's all kind of the same hand shape, but just, same hand, no, different hand shape, but different move. Wait, I'm confusing myself.
You got that?
Same movement, same location, but different hand shape. Next one is place of articulation. Now, normally this is with like the tongue and everything, but in sign language, it's like where your hand is. So for example, it's the same hand shape, same movement, but different place, which causes different meaning. So I have 3 words here: summer, ugly, and dry. So summer is at the forehead. Summer, ugly, and dry. So same thing, just in different locations. And then the last thing is the movement. So hand shape is the same, place is the same, just the hand movement is different, which causes a different meaning. So we got tape, chair, and train. So tape is like tape, like you pulling out the tape. Tape, chair, and train. So yeah, that's like the 3 main things of sign language phonology. And some other interesting thing is, since we don't have, a voice and everything, the way we use to emphasize something being louder or smaller, for louder, we just sign bigger. So for example, big, big. Or if you want to decrease the volume, we sign smaller. And we kind of sign, we don't sign over here. We sign like over here and trying to hide it from somebody. So for example, if I'm like talking about this person over here, I would be like, turn my body to block so they can't see my hands over here. So that's how deaf people gossip. They just turn their body and like just block their hands. Okay, and of course, spoken language have context. And context in sign language is what we call non-manual signs. Okay, so the definition of manual is of or done with the hands. So sign language is a manual language. But sign language also has non-manual aspect. And what non-manual is not using the hands. So basically everything about you that's not the hands is also part of the sign language. So you know how native speakers, they sound very more natural, they have different tones and everything. You can tell they're native speakers. And then you can tell if somebody's not a native speaker. Like they sound very monotonous, they don't sound like how native speakers sound. Same thing for sign language. If you sign without using non-manual signs, deaf people would think you're boring to read, boring to listen to. So meaning of the statement, so like I said, so the meaning would still be the same, but the tone and emphasis in spoken languages will be in the non-manual actions. So what are non-manual actions? Well, it's face and body movements. Now this is Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and this is Michael Jackson. So I'm just going to give some examples. So normally this sign, this is the sign for big pizza. So if I just wanted to say big pizza, I'd be like, big pizza. But if I wanted to add tone and sound like more like a native signer, I'd be like, oh. So you notice my puffing at the cheek, that would emphasize the largeness of the pizza. Now if I want to ask a question, normally people would be like, question. But that sounds boring, so what native signers do is they raise their eyebrow, a questioning look. So it's like, question? And then to make sure to affirm something, to include somebody, we lean forward. So I'll be like, oh, you are my family. That's kind of in cold and distance. But I want to make it more personal. I'll be like, you are my family. So I lean forward. And then for amazement, like, oh, like you're really shocked. You like open like a, or your eye wide is like, so if, for example, if I want to say wow, I'll be like, this is like non-native speaking, wow. But if I do this, like, oh, wow. It's like much more exciting, much more native sounding. And then backward lean is the opposite of forward lean. So if you don't want to be included with them, then you just lean backwards. It's like, I don't like, you know. Okay, and that's it.
Okay, Alex, thank you.
So any questions? What?
Yeah, does it make difference in meaning if you use left hand instead of right?
No. Like even what's interesting though, if you're left, well, okay, what you do is because normally right hand is like the subject of the sentence. So if you're talking about yourself, you'll use your right hand as your person. But if you're left-handed, then you'll use your left hand as the subject. So it's like depends on.
Oh.
So that's why it's kind of confusing if I see a left-handed signer and he uses his left hand, and I'm like, oh, he's left-handed. Oh, okay.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is that true for all sign languages?
Hmm?
Is that true for all sign languages? That
Oh no, probably just American Sign Language. Oh, Japanese Sign Language does it too, but I don't know if I should do that this particular example because that's kind of okay. I'll do it. Whatever. We're all adults here.
Yeah.
So in Japanese Sign Language, if you want to say you have siblings like brothers or sisters, so okay, one I'm gonna flip you guys off, but it's actually Japanese Sign Language. So this is the sign for girl in Japanese. This is the sign for guy. Now I want to say they're changing the sign because Hollywood influences more Japanese people know what this sign means. So they're changing it to something else. I don't know what, but this is how it was before. So if I want to say I have an older brother, so I have two older brothers. This is me. I'm this guy. This is my older brother. Older brother. If I say I have a younger brother, I'll be like younger brother. If I have an older sister, then older sister, younger sister, or same age. So if I was a girl, then this would be me. Then.
So if you're left hand or just.
So in Japan, left hand is the subject for that particular context. I don't know if it spreads out to all the other contexts. Like I actually want to learn Japanese Sign Language. I think it'll help me with learning my actual spoken Japanese. I'm doing really bad at that.
Well, one thing I know about Taiwanese sign language is my best friend studied it, the phonology of it in grad school was that is little brother in Taiwanese sign language. He said,
Nice.
that's fascinating.
Okay, do you have any other questions?